gays for Gaza, or I don't know, gays for Iran. I said, you're supporting, not you. The people who do that are supporting the people who would murder them. They hang gays on cranes in Iran. If you're gay in Gaza, your fate is sealed. Why is it that we don't have peace? Why? Well, is it this government? Is it me? There were 5 other prime ministers since Oslo, since the peace process began. How come they didn't make peace? Well, the reason they didn't make peace is because the underlying problem preventing peace is not Israel's willingness to make a territorial compromise, even a very generous one. It's that after Gaza, Israelis ask a question. What happens when we set up a Palestinian state on the other side? Do we get a state that lives in peace with us? Or do we get a state that seeks to destroy us and fires thousands of rockets on our heads? Israel went through the book. It went by the book. It left Gaza to the last square centimeter. It took away all the settlements, skip freeze, just took them apart. It even disinterred people from their graves, handed the keys over to Abu Mazen, who promptly lost it to Hamas, even though they were only 3,000 strong then and he had 15,000 troops. They kicked him out. Now we have 30,000 Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and they fired, I don't know, 15,000, 16,000 rockets on Israel from Gaza since. The same thing happened to us in Lebanon. We left Lebanon to the last square inch. We got not Hamas, we got another proxy of Iran, Hezbollah, and they fired about 15,000 rockets on us. So Israelis ask a simple question, which I ask. If we were to set up a Palestinian state, how do we make sure that that state does not become another Gaza and is not committed to our destruction and doesn't work to our destruction? The answer to that falls into 2 categories. One, and these are not conditions for entering talks. I have no conditions for entering talks. I'm willing to meet up. You should invite Abu Mazen here. That's what you really should do. You should invite him and me. I'm sitting here. I'm willing to wait. Knesset can wait. Fine. We'll see if he comes. I am willing to enter the talks without any conditions. And for the last 7 years, Abu Mazen deigned to talk to me for 6 hours. 6 hours. That's it. How could you make progress on the issues I'm going to talk about in a minute if you won't meet and talk? That doesn't mean that the charges aren't leveled at us. They always are. But I'm talking about facts. These are facts. Now, in order to avoid another Gaza, which is the opposite of peace, you need 2 things. First, you have to make sure that the Palestinian state that is formed is not committed to Israel's destruction, that it ends all demands, recognizes Israel, and doesn't seek to flood it with the descendants of refugees, any more than I would seek to flood the Palestinian state with the descendants of settlers. Do you agree, Mr. Abbas? Refuses to answer that. That's what we mean by a nation state of the Jewish people. Palestinians go there, if they choose, and Jews go to Israel, if they choose. Can we have that arrangement? Mutual recognition of 2 nation states. That's the first term. The second thing is, what happens if things go awry? What happens if this territory is taken over, the way Gaza was taken over? Then we need a long-term security presence of Israel to assure that doesn't happen. And right now, I don't see any other force. I don't see any other force. I mean, who's going to do it? Austrian peacekeepers? We tried that on the Golan Heights. These 2 conditions of mutual recognition and security arrangements, I think, do we see that likely right now in the immediate future? No. Is this the right formula, I think, down the line? Yes. Can it happen? I don't think the Palestinians will necessarily accept it by themselves, but I think because of the change that is happening in the region, because there's a huge change happening in the region, it might be that leading Arab countries might encourage a future Palestinian leadership, or even this one, to accept that kind of deal. And if that happened, I think Israelis would go for it. They'd go for something that they thought was mutual recognition and that was secure.
You know, with respect, I think a lot of progressives think, not only in the U.S. but around the world, that Israel isn't currently acting neutrally. That it has been acting. It has been acting vis-a-vis peace, and it has been acting through the advancement, the expansion of settlements, the idea that there's been a steady growth of settlements that are strategically placed. The understanding is strategically placed in order to make a Palestinian state more difficult, or that it has that result. What do you say to those concerns that the settlement expansion is actually something that's making peace more difficult?
Well, I think two things. First, factually, the there have been no new settlements built in the last 20 years, and even before I became Prime Minister the first time. The additions are in existing communities. The map doesn't materially change. By the way, Google this, because this is just repeated ad nauseum. So it assumes the cachet of self-evident truth that they were gobbling up land and so on. We're not gobbling up land because it doesn't take up any land. I mean, the total amount of built-up land is just a few percent. And the addition, if you look at over time, the addition, it's got to be a fraction of a percent, maybe 1/10 of 1%, 2/10 of 1%, maybe I'm wrong, maybe 3/10 of 1%. That's the land that is being gobbled up. That's a factual question. That should not be something that is debated. And yet it's become an axiom that we are gobbling up land. We're not, simply because it doesn't happen. But here's what the actual statistics of construction are. Barak built 5,000 units a year. Sharon built 1,800 units a year. Olmert built 1,700 units a year. And my government, this doesn't help me back home, has built 1,500 units a year. That's a fact, okay? That's not subject to question. Statistics, government statistics, in our case, our statistics, by the way, are not in any way influenced by political manipulation. This is an independent authority, and it was quoted in one of the papers that most support me, Haaretz. It's a fact, okay? So here's the two things that I'm saying. One, the settlements are there. The growth in the settlements does not materially affect the potential map for peace. And third, I think that it's an issue that can be resolved, but I don't think it's the core issue. The reason it's not the core issue is it wasn't a core issue in Gaza either. So what's the problem? The problem, look, my grandfather, I always say this, I think I date the conflict back to 1920. My grandfather came in a boat in 1920, landed in Jaffa, went to the immigration depot, the Jewish immigration office in Jaffa. That office was hit a few months later by Arab attackers. They killed 6 or 7 Jews, including a famous writer, Brenner, great writer. And then we had riots and attacks in 1921, 1929 on the ancient Jewish community of Hebron, 1936 to 1939, 3 years, and 1947, of course, and 1948, the partition. There was no territories. There was no settlements. And then this continued into 1967, when we had a noose of death placed around us. This is 50 years, 47 years, from 1920 to 1967. Half a century. What's the root cause of this? It can't be the settlements, because it can't be the territories, because there weren't any. Now we get in there, and we leave Gaza, and they keep on attacking us. And I'm telling you that the real issue is whether the Palestinians are divided, one half living in Gaza, overtaken by the militant Islamists, openly calls for a destruction, and the other half in the West Bank refuses to confront them. And when I say to Abu Mazen, I say, okay, for God's sake, recognize the Jewish state already, as I recognize the Palestinian state. And for God's sake, let's talk about long-term security arrangements, so we have those two anchors for real peace. He won't do it. The settlements can be resolved within that context, easily. Easily. Well, not that easily, but not that hard either.
But I think one of the issues really is, you say that there have been 1,500 a year. I hear that they're less. But why continue with them?
People
When
live there. People live there. Look, they're human beings. You don't say, well, all the firstborn, throw them on the other side of the green line. I mean, they're living there. They're living in 3 blocks primarily. That's where most of the construction is taking place. This is not foreign land. I know it's comfortable to say that this is the Belgian Congo. For God's sake, Jews have been living there for 4,000 years. So are Arabs. I don't say we throw you out. There's a massive Arab construction, massive, that is against Oslo. It's not important right now. And nobody says, how come they're building there in disputed lands? Nobody even dares to think that. And yet the Jews are somehow, there's this ethnic cleansing idea. What is this ethnic cleansing business? Why do we have in Israel Arabs living in the Galilee, having in the Negev everywhere, in the Knesset, in the Supreme Court, full civic rights, not a perfect society, but in the Middle East, the only ones who enjoy the rights of a democratic society. Nobody questions that, and we don't question it, certainly I don't. Yet the idea of a Palestinian state, it's got to be Judenrein, it's got to be clean, there can't be any Jews there. What is this? What kind of standard is this that we accept and the world accepts and progressives accept? You don't want that. I mean, I think you should ask these questions to the courts. Like, I see gays for Gaza, or gays for Iran. I said, you're supporting, not you. The people who do that are supporting the people who would murder them. They hang gays on cranes in Iran. If you're gay in Gaza, your fate is sealed.
Yeah, no. I should say
So-
we appreciate. We're not.
So
No one's
there's-
making equivalence
Well,
between the
what I'm
rights.
saying is, and forgive me for being so clear about it. I think there's something fundamentally wrong. Fundamentally wrong. Israel wants peace. Israel has made enormous sacrifices for peace. I've made the 2 states for 2 people statement in Bar Ilan University, in a religious university. Abu Mazen has not yet made the Birzeit speech. He hasn't gone to his own people and said, give up the ghost. We're not going back to Jaffa. And Israel is here to stay by right. He's not done that. I have been asked to freeze statements. I did. No prime minister has done it before. Didn't help. For 10 months, he wouldn't come to the table. It didn't help. I did other things which were even harder, like releasing prisoners, which was probably the hardest decision I've made. Didn't help. Didn't help twice. One, it didn't help them get to the table, and it didn't help launch the negotiations that we want. And second, it didn't absolve me of the blame that is attached to the Prime Minister of Israel and the government of Israel by dint of people who don't understand what is really driving this conflict. In the Middle East, what is driving the conflicts with an S is the battle between modernity and early medievalism. It is not the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Syria has collapsed, Iraq has collapsed, Yemen has collapsed, Libya has collapsed, and the other states are wobbly. And that's a larger civilizational battle. In the specific confines of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, what is driving the conflict, and unfortunately still drives the conflict, is the persistent refusal to recognize a nation state for the Jewish people in any boundaries. That remains the problem. If you want to solve a problem, address the problem. Don't address what is not the problem, address that problem. It is not settlements, it is the persistent refusal to accept the Jewish state. If you have a willingness to accept the Jewish state, you will solve the settlement problem.